So we will begin by building all our dimensions. The first dimension that we're going to work on is the date dimension. We want to create rows in the date dimension for each possible date that will exist in our data warehouse. We'll do that by using an input data node. Now we've got to connect to a database, and what we're going to go do is go read in our Zagi small from the sales transaction, which is the only date that we have available. So we know when a transaction happened because it happened in the sales transaction. So we should have some saved connections if you followed the instructions before. And I'll say MySQL. And it shows me all the possible databases. So I'm going to go to Zagi small. And I know it's in sales transaction. And I'm going to pick transaction date. And that's the column that I want back. Notice it brought up the whole table. I did not have to write any SQL. It's using something called a visual query builder. I could also just manually write it if I want. So it's showing me here that it pulled the sales transaction column. And I click OK. If I run that real quickly, I can see that it read 5 rows. So there are actually 3 possible dates. So the next thing I want to do is I want to just have 1 row per date, because I'm going to further go through and create some calculations for each date. So I'm going to find the select distinct in my preparation. So here's a unique. I drag that over. And there's only 1 column, so I will tell it I want just a unique date. And if I go ahead and run that, I notice I now have 2 rows. And it is the 2 distinct dates that exist in my data set. Now this isn't realistic, right? If we run this on a real data warehouse, we probably have thousands of possible dates. But we've kept this example small so we can trace what's happening to the data. Next, we're going to give the table a unique key. So we actually have a record ID operator that we can drop. And we want it on the unique side. Notice that there's 2 exits out of this operator. One says unique, one says duplicates. If we had connected to the duplicates, we'd get only the duplicates. And we have the availability to rename this, so I will name it calendar key. Let's go ahead and run that. And notice we now have a calendar key that is nonsensical. It's just a number, a sequential number, and it is the most important thing is it's integer, which is what we want for our dimensions. Next, we're going to rename one of our fields to something that makes a little more sense to our dimension. So we've got this strange name left over from the original transactional database, which is tdate, and we're going to rename that to full date. If we run that, we now have a field called full date, and the type should be date. Now we're going to go through and calculate one by one all the different attributes that we had put in our star schema, which is shown in the corner. So we will drag the formula, and we can write several formulas in just one operator. We just keep adding add. So we're going to select a new column, add a column, and now over here we have the opportunity to write what that column is. I'm going to write day of the week. And here it tests it for me. I haven't given it an expression. I've got the ability here on the left-hand side to bring up code, bring up variables that already exist in my data set, some saved expressions. So what I want to use is an expression that extracts from the date time a particular value. So I'm going to do date time format. It's got highlighted date for me, so I'm going to say full date. And then in parentheses, and you can look these up in the Alteryx manual, I'm going to put in quotes ampersand A. And notice that it wrote there for me Tuesday. So if I run this, It has figured out the day of the week for me for each one of our 2 dates. Now imagine if we have thousands of dates, which would be the most realistic case in a real data warehouse, then it would have figured out that day of the week for me. Why are we storing it? Because we don't want to have to calculate it each time that we write a query. So we're purposely writing a data warehouse that will store this information. We'll go ahead and add a new calculation. We'll call that column, new column, day of the month. So day of month. I'm going to use that same date time format. I want to put full date as my date here. And this time, I'm going to write in parentheses, ampersand, little d. Notice it says 1, so that is the actual day of the month for that date. I test my very first value. Let's do one more. Again, we're going to add a column. We'll call that one month. And we'll use the expression, again, date time format. It's very useful. Very little code, manual code writing that you need to do. Full date. And then this time, I'm going to write ampersand B in quotes. And these are all, you can look these all up in the documentation. Now you see it wrote the month name, January. I'm going to add one more. This one I'm going to call quarter. And I actually am going to borrow some code, which I have pasted for you in Canvas if you needed, but you could manually write this as well. So I'm just going to paste this code here for quarter. And I said the letter Q and concatenated to a series of ifs. And these ifs look at a piece of the full date, and they say if the substring of the full date is 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, so January, February, March, it's quarter 1. If not 2, if not 3, if not 4, and you notice that it's put the tested field over here. And I'm going to add one more, which is the year. Scroll down a little bit, add column, say year, and I'm going to use that date time format again. Notice I typed a few letters of it and it found it for me. I'll use the X here to bring in full date. And as far as format, now I'm going to say ampersand Y. And now it filled out the year for me. So notice that I was able to I can put as many formulas as I want using the formula. I can put them all and I'll concatenate them at the end. In fact, let's run and see what that looks like. So now I have full date, the day of the week, the day of the month, the quarter, and the year. Okay, and you can reuse some of this code for your group assignment. Now it's finally time to write it out to my SQL table. So I go over to an Out tab, and I say Output Data, and I'm going to connect to my saved connection. It actually found it over here, the MySQL connection, and it's going to ask me what I want to call that table because it's a brand new table. So I'll say dim calendar, and it's going to create a new table for me. There's some options that I have here, but one of the things that I want to do is, since I really haven't specified a schema, is to specify the schema in the pre-create SQL statement. What does that mean? Before the SQL statement is created by Alteryx to write the table, here's some SQL you should execute ahead of time. And what I'm going to tell it is create the schema. Use the Zagi data warehouse schema. So I say, zoom in for that, use Zagi data warehouse. So you've seen this statement before. And then I say drop table if exists, dim calendar. Why do I want to do that? If I run my ETL job more than once, I will want to drop the original table or it's going to run into a problem because it's going to try to create a brand new table. Let's go ahead and run that. Okay, and let's jump over to SQL and see if our date dimension is there. We'll hit refresh. Let's get to Zagi Data Warehouse. And sure enough, we have a brand new table. It is a calendar dimension. Let's take a look at it. It has exactly those columns that we just created in Alteryx. One thing we might want to do is to go check the data types that we assigned in this calculation. So we made this, for example, the day of the week, a variable string with a humongous size. We can do that, but maybe let's change this to, what's the biggest that a day of the week could be? Tuesday, 10, 15, let's say 15. It's probably plenty. Same with day of the month. Day of the month is going to be one character, right? So we can say character, depending on what we want to do with it. We might want to do some math on it, or we may want to use it as a character. Let's make it a string too, since it never is going to be bigger than 2 characters. That's so we don't take up too much room in our database. Though storage is cheap, we really don't want to take up thousands of characters for something. Month is going to be the actual month name. We can make that a variable string. Let's make it 25. Quarter is just going to be quarter plus a single digit number, so we can make that string too. And then year, it's going to be 4 characters, so go ahead and make that string 4. Now we can rerun that because we put that drop the dimension table if we were to rerun it, so it's not going to get confused. When it comes to writing out our table, it's going to say if it exists already, go ahead and erase it and overwrite it. Okay, so if we go over to MySQL, and we took a look at our calendar table, but we can see that now these are the data types, reflect the data types that we gave them in Alteryx.